A PSA 8 Kobe Bryant card was regraded from an 8 to a 9. Did some hanky-panky occur specifically with trimming, or is there something else that we need to talk to in this instance? That's going to be the talking point for today's video, and I think is a pretty interesting one. Now, this was shared with me last week by a subscriber who was looking at a Kobe card on PWCC's platform and noticed that the card was previously graded by PSA. Now, this is the card in question. It's sold for 1,440 USD. But what this person did happen to notice is that the one that was listed for sale on PWCC's website, 31 of 50, was previously sold by PWCC, as you can see here back in 2018. The only difference was it was in a PSA 8, also 31 of 50. The serial numbers are in fact in the same position. These are in fact the same card. Now, as we've talked to before, when you see things like this and you see cards get bumped up 2 grades, because it is 2 grades in this instance, i.e. PSA have an 8.5, which they rarely use these days. Your first point goes to, okay, did some trimming occur here? Now, looking at the front of the cards, I can alternate between the two. I'll put the links down to both auctions below so you can look for yourself. I can't see anything on the front of the card that indicates trimming. Now, the back is another question potentially. But the thing that's, pretty interesting here is you guys might say, well, why is the color so different? It just comes down to the scans that PWCC used back then. In 2018, they were very poor. It is, 5 years ago. This one a lot clearer. It looks like, there's probably more things happening to the card, i.e. changes to the card. But if you look up close, not much has actually changed. Now, if we look at the back of the card, one of the first things you see when you're looking at the PSA version, which is what's on screen right now, if we zoom in a little bit and we look down the bottom, you can sort of see here that there is some chipping, right? And over here on this corner as well. And if you're going to trim a card, that's going to be the first thing you look for, right? Or trying to correct. And, when my subscriber sent me this and I looked into it, this is the first thing that I looked at when I thought, okay, did this card in fact get trimmed before it crossed to a PSA 9? It's actually pretty interesting if I just jump to how much I was zoomed in by 1.9 times, so we can make sure we're looking at things the same way. You can sort of see here that the same chipping and edge wear persists right between the two. So this just leads me to the fact that this card is probably just regraded and slipped by PSA, i.e. they've missed a few things. There's also some weird marks there that might be on the case over here, but it doesn't look like it. That's not present over here. But again, that could be, just an indication of the quality of scans. But just because we're seeing chipping on the PSA 8 version that is now persistent on the PSA 9, it indicates to me that it's not trimmed and PSA have just missed it, which goes to, a wider talking point that we touched on actually the other day around what should you be doing when you're looking to buy a card? This card, like I just said, wasn't a PSA 8. It sold for like $150 or so back in 2018. Yes, that market is not comparable. Now sold for, $1,500, including buyer's premium. You need to be doing your research when you're looking at these things, right? Because that's obviously a big jump in value driven by a different market. But if you're looking to buy these kinds of cards, you can't just be trusting the label that's on them. And I talk to this all the time. I talk to pop reports all the time as well. In that video the other day where we spoke about pop reports and how people place so much trust in them, that PSA 8 is still pretty clear within this pop report, right? And then if you're jumping into this PSA 9, like I touched on the other day around crossovers, you're buying a card that was previously a PSA 8. And if you look at it quite closely, it probably should be a PSA 8 and not a PSA 9. So what does that mean for you? You've paid big money for a card, maybe just by looking at the label as opposed to inspecting the card itself. In that video that I'll reference once again, I talk to me personally when I'm looking to buy cards, right? If I see that the same card, which in this card, it is 100% the same card, was previously in a PSA 8 versus a PSA 9, I'm not going to pay the premium for a PSA 9. Like, yeah, if I think the grader has made the mistake, because I'm obviously going to inspect the card myself, I buy the card, not the holder, not the label, it might mean that I pay a little bit more money. But something like this where that chipping is still there, especially on the front. There's a few other things that look a little bit, suspect that PSA may have missed just by making a mistake. I'm not going to pay the premium for a PSA 9 in that instance. And my expectation would be that if I ever buy a card and then look to sell it, the person buying it from me would most likely do the same sort of thing. And I don't know how commonplace that actually is. Obviously, a lot of the people that watch the channel, if not everyone, has that sort of mindset because they are pretty much collectors first and foremost. But this just seems to be something that's lost over the last few years within this industry, within this hobby. And I hate saying the word industry, within this hobby, right? People have, forgotten about this piece. And it worries me a little bit the amount of people that might have some cards like this in their collection that they've just bought purely off the label, not realizing that the card itself is actually a little bit questionable in terms of did it actually meet the standards for that grade. And we're seeing trends within this hobby, right? If you've been around for a long time, like me, I've been collecting my whole life, you've seen things fluctuate, right? You go through periods where certain graders grade easier than others. You go through periods where collectors seem to value things over others. Are we now in a period where collectors and participants within this hobby aren't actually across what they're buying? I think that's, again, painfully obvious, and it's been talked to death over the last few years. Just an interesting one that you're going to have people that have paid big money for cards that probably shouldn't have been assigned those values in the first place. And it's not just, cards that are poorly graded. It's also cards that are inflated within pop reports that people aren't really talking about. It's also people buying serial numbered cards, as we talked to many months ago, that aren't actually that rare based on, how many other iterations, how much product gets released year on year for that player, right? It just gets insane, the printing runs that we're talking about here. There's all these things that people are sort of, buying into and placing values on that either aren't actually that rare, aren't actually what they say they are, or people haven't done their due diligence, right? It's basically all three of those things, and you're seeing this happen sort of everywhere. So it's again a reminder for you all just to be doing this kind of thing when you're looking to buy the cards, asking these kinds of questions. It's not hard to check sales history on PWCC. You literally type in PWCC sales history, it'll take you to a sales history website. I believe it's, sales-history at PWCC Marketplace or something along those lines. And you can type in the card that you're looking for, and you're going to see, an example of the card you're searching for, right? And if it's not on PWCC's website, look at Terapeak, look at 130 Point, look at Golden Auction Histories, look at the Blowout Forums, Google it or search it on YouTube, I should say. You ask all these questions, you might find the card you're looking for, which might then indicate to you, okay, am I overpaying for this card? Was his card previously in a lower grade? Was his card previously in a higher grade? Why did this card get regraded? Was this card patch swapped? All these things sort of come off the back of you just doing a little bit of a Google. And I think that's, paramount. And again, it's a bit silly that I need to be talking about these things or feel the need to talk about these things, but just the things I've seen on social media, just the things I've seen in YouTube videos, just the things I've seen and trends I've seen in auction sale prices, it looks like not enough people are keeping this sort of thing front of mind. And it is what it is. Now, again, people will think this content is negative for whatever reason, but it's just one of those things that I'm just having a conversation with you guys to try and uplift your knowledge and remind you that there are things you could be doing to better prevent yourself from getting scammed or not getting scammed, because this isn't really a scam in this instance. It's more so keeping things front of mind so you can, spend your money the most efficiently and effectively, right? You're not going to pay top dollar for a card that may have graded lower in the past or did in fact grade lower in the past. Like I said, if I'm a buyer, that's the stuff I factor in when I buy things. And I know many others do as well. Don't just buy the freaking label, inspect the card yourself and you're going to be fine. Now, I mentioned late last week that I had a ship my cards order coming. FedEx have screwed me around a little bit. It hasn't arrived yet. I'm going to pick it up tomorrow myself because they said it was coming the last 2 days and they basically dogged me and didn't bloody deliver it. So screw you, FedEx, but I'm going to pick it up tomorrow. You'll see it in my video, which will be Friday early morning, Australian time, late Thursday afternoon, US time. So stay tuned for that because there's a lot of pretty cool cards in there that I'm really excited to actually finally get my hands on. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one down below. Let me know if you have any other tips as well that you think I may have missed when it comes to doing some due diligence before you go ahead and buy a card, and the research that you do, the tips and tricks you have on actually how to spot some of this stuff, because there are lots of things that people could be doing that they're not, and it's sort of burning them right now. And that's just based off also the questions that I get asked, not just the things I'm seeing on social media myself. So as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.